My wife, Laura, and I have been married for 28 years, and for most of it, I thought we had something solid. I mean, sure, we had our ups and downs, just like any other couple. But after almost 3 decades together, I assumed we'd weathered all the storms. We had 2 kids who were now grown and out of the house, and our lives had settled into a comfortable rhythm. We weren't exactly the fiery young lovers we once were, but who is after that long? Then, one day, out of the blue, things started to feel off. Laura began spending more time on her phone, staying late at work more often than usual, and seemed distant, like her mind was somewhere else. I brushed it off at first. Maybe it was work stress, or maybe she was going through something personal that she didn't feel like sharing yet. But my gut told me something wasn't right. And when you've been married for 28 years, you learn to trust your gut. It all started to unravel one Tuesday night. We were sitting at dinner, and she casually mentioned she was going to a work dinner with a colleague the next evening. Now, that wouldn't have been a big deal, except this was the 3rd time in 2 weeks. I looked at her, and something about the way she said it just felt wrong. I asked her who she was going with, and she waved her hand, saying, "Oh, just Mark. He's been helping me out with this project at work." Mark. The name meant nothing to me at the time, but the way she smiled when she said it felt like a crack in our marriage I hadn't seen before. A warning bell went off in my head, but I didn't push it. Not yet. That night, after she went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening. Something big. I did something I'd never done before in our entire marriage. I checked her phone. And there it was. A message from Mark, her colleague. The words burned into my brain, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I'll get us that private table again." I nearly threw her phone across the room. That's when I knew. My wife was cheating on me. But instead of confronting her right away, I decided to play it smart. If she was stepping out on me after 28 years, I wasn't just going to sit back and be the fool. No, I wanted to know everything, who this Mark guy was, how long this had been going on, and exactly what they were doing behind my back. I wasn't going to just accuse her without proof. I wanted to hit her where it would hurt the most. So I called a detective. Hiring a detective was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Laura had no idea what was coming, and honestly, neither did I. I was filled with a mixture of dread and curiosity, not really wanting to know the full extent of her betrayal, but also needing to know. The detective was discreet, professional, and fast. Within a week, I had everything: pictures, details, times, places. Mark wasn't just some random colleague. He was married, too. A real stand-up guy with 2 kids, a wife of his own, and apparently, a side hobby of screwing someone else's wife. They weren't just having work dinners, they were meeting at hotels, sneaking around like a couple of high schoolers. And as if that wasn't enough, she had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. Every time she said she was going out with the girls or staying late at the office, it had been with him. I sat at my desk, staring at the photos, feeling the floor drop out from under me. There they were, holding hands, walking into a hotel like it was the most natural thing in the world. There was even a picture of them kissing, right in front of her car, like she didn't have a husband and 28 years of marriage at home waiting for her. My first instinct was to drive to wherever she was and blow the whole thing up, confront her in front of Mark, in front of anyone who would listen. But that's not how you play the long game. No, I needed to be smarter than that. She didn't know I knew. She was still pretending, still thinking she could keep it hidden. And I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my temper. Instead, I waited. I let her lie to my face a few more times, going through the motions, pretending not to notice how she smiled at her phone, how she looked at me like I was just some piece of furniture she'd gotten used to ignoring. The detective kept feeding me more information, and with each new piece, my anger turned into something else, something colder. That's when I realized I wasn't just going to divorce her. I was going to make her feel the betrayal like I did. But I needed to play it just right. And I knew just how to do it. You see, there's this woman at work, Megan. She's a coworker, a little younger than me, always flirty, always making comments about how I should get out more, and how lucky my wife must be to have a husband like me. I'd never thought much of it before. I've never cheated, never even considered it. But after what I learned about Laura, something shifted. If she could betray me with this Mark guy, why the hell should I keep playing by the rules? Megan was the perfect opportunity. I wasn't going to just cheat for the sake of it, I wanted Laura to see it. To feel it. To know that I wasn't the only one who could play dirty. So, I decided to move forward with my plan. It wasn't hard to get Megan on board. She had been eyeing me for months, maybe longer. All it took was a few extra smiles, a couple of compliments, and before I knew it, we were flirting openly at the office. I had no intention of turning this into something real. I wasn't looking for love or even lust. This was about sending a message, plain and simple. I made sure it was the same night Laura had one of her so-called work dinners scheduled. It was perfect. While she was out with her lover, I was setting the stage for her big surprise at home. Megan had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. She thought this was just a regular hookup, and I didn't bother to explain. In a way, it made the whole thing feel even more twisted, like I was orchestrating my own mini-drama with all the moving parts in place. We agreed to meet at my house, of course. I didn't want to do it in some hotel or random spot. No, I wanted it to happen right here, in the very bed Laura and I shared. That way, when she walked in, there would be no ambiguity about what she was seeing. She couldn't deny it, couldn't twist the story. This was going to be as blatant and raw as possible. Megan arrived around 7, looking exactly like I needed her to. She wore this tight black dress that left almost nothing to the imagination, and she had this energy about her, like she was thrilled to finally be getting what she wanted. I played along, acting like I was equally excited. In truth, my mind was far from the moment. I was already picturing Laura's face, the shock, the horror, everything that would come crashing down on her in one fell swoop. We opened a bottle of wine, sat on the couch, and talked for a bit, though I could hardly focus on anything Megan was saying. I just kept glancing at the clock, waiting for Laura to come home from her dinner. Megan was flirting hard, laughing at every little thing I said, touching my arm, my leg. I pretended to be into it, but my thoughts were laser-focused on one thing, the moment Laura walked through that door. After what felt like hours of small talk, I finally suggested we move things upstairs. Megan didn't hesitate. We headed to the bedroom, and I'll be honest, it was mechanical, cold, just like I knew it would be. This wasn't about sex, not really. It was about what came next. Halfway through, I heard it, the sound of the front door opening. Laura was home. My heart raced, not from excitement, but from anticipation. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. I didn't stop. I wanted her to walk in on it, to see everything. And she did. The bedroom door swung open, and there she was, standing in the doorway, frozen in place. For a second, no one moved. Laura's face turned pale, her mouth dropped open, and I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to process what she was seeing. She had caught me, no, I had let her catch me. And the look on her face. It was priceless. Megan, bless her heart, had no idea what was going on. She quickly pulled away, scrambling to grab her clothes, stammering out some excuse as she tried to dress herself in record time. I didn't bother to stop her. I wasn't interested in her anymore. My eyes were locked on Laura. And then the fireworks began. Laura's reaction was everything I had hoped for, and then some. As soon as Megan rushed out of the room, clothes half on, face beet red, Laura snapped. She let out this guttural scream, like she had been stabbed. It was the kind of sound you only hear when someone's entire world is falling apart in real time. I didn't move. I just lay there, watching her come unglued. You're a monster, she shrieked, pacing back and forth like a trapped animal. How could you do this to me? After everything? In our house? I had to bite back a laugh. The hypocrisy of it all was almost too much to handle. She was acting like I was the one who had destroyed our marriage, like I was the one sneaking off to hotels and kissing some loser named Mark. I let her scream, let her throw her little tantrum. In a way, it was kind of amusing to see her so out of control, so helpless. Finally, she stopped pacing and just stood there, staring at me with this wild, frantic look in her eyes. Why? She demanded. Why would you do this? Is this because I've been busy with work? You think this justifies it? I sat up in bed, still calm, still in control. Busy with work, huh? I said, my voice cold. Is that what you're calling it these days? Her eyes darted around the room like she was trying to figure out what I was getting at. For a split second, I thought she might try to lie her way out of it. Laura had always been good at twisting things, making herself the victim, even when she was dead wrong. But this time, there was no way out for her. You've been screwing Mark behind my back for months, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. Don't act like you're the victim here, Laura. I know everything. Her face went from shock to pure panic. She tried to stammer out a denial, but it was too late. I reached over to my nightstand and grabbed my phone. With a few swipes, I pulled up the photos, the ones the detective had taken of her and Mark, cozying up at restaurants, sneaking into hotels, kissing like they were teenagers who couldn't keep their hands off each other. I held the phone out in front of her, letting her see the evidence, the cold, hard truth she could no longer deny. I know about your little affair, I said, my voice low but firm. I've known for weeks. So don't stand there and act like this is all on me. You did this, Laura. You blew up our marriage the second you decided to screw around with Mark. She looked like she had been hit by a truck. Her eyes went wide, her lips trembling as she stared at the photos, her face drained of color. For a second, I thought she might faint. But then, in true Laura fashion, she switched gears. The panic turned into rage. You bastard, she screamed. How dare you invade my privacy like that? You're stalking me now. Is that what this is? I couldn't help it, I laughed. A full, bitter laugh that echoed through the room. Stalking her, that was her defense. The audacity was almost impressive. Privacy? I asked, incredulous. You're worried about privacy? While you're screwing some other. Laura's face twisted in fury, but it was the kind of fury that comes when someone knows they've been cornered. She was flailing, trying to find a way to turn this around, but I wasn't going to give her an inch. Don't sit there and pretend you're the victim, I said, shaking my head. You've been lying to me for months. Sneaking around like I'm too stupid to figure it out. And now, you want to act outraged because I caught you? Unbelievable. She tried to speak, her hands flailing as she searched for words. It wasn't like that, she spat. Mark's just a friend. You're blowing this out of proportion. I almost laughed again. A friend? She was still clinging to that pathetic excuse. I held up my phone, scrolling through the photos. Yeah. Just a friend. Because these pictures tell a different story, Laura. What kind of a friend kisses you like this in a parking lot? Or checks into a hotel room with you? Her face went pale, her jaw clenching so hard I thought she might crack a tooth. But even then, she didn't back down. She couldn't. Laura was the kind of person who would lie until her last breath, no matter how much evidence was stacked against her. You don't understand, she hissed, her voice desperate. Things haven't been right between us for a long time, and I needed someone to talk to, someone who made me feel alive again. There it was. The classic cheater's script. I had heard enough stories from friends and coworkers to know exactly how this was going to go. She'd play the wounded wife, claim that I hadn't been emotionally available, that she'd been forced into this affair because of something I did or didn't do. The irony was, I had been there. Always. Through every rough patch, through every moment of doubt, I was the one who stayed, who worked through things. And here she was, rewriting history to make herself the victim. You needed someone to make you feel alive. I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. And that someone just happened to be your coworker. I've been right here, Laura. For 28 years, I've been right here. But you couldn't be bothered to talk to me, could you? No, you needed someone else to make you feel special. I could see it in her eyes, she knew she was losing. But instead of coming clean, instead of admitting what she had done, she doubled down, throwing herself into a full-blown tantrum. You've been so distant, she shouted. Ever since the kids left, it's like you don't even care about me anymore. I needed someone who actually paid attention to me. I stared at her, incredulous. Distant? Laura, I've been working my ass off to provide for us, to give us everything we could ever need. If I was distant, it was because I was busy keeping this family together. And this is how you repay me. Her face contorted with rage again, but it was clear she was running out of steam. She could shout all she wanted, but the facts were staring her in the face, undeniable and cold. And then, she made her last, desperate move. You're no saint either, she snapped. Look at you, sleeping with some woman in our bed. You've been waiting for an excuse to cheat, haven't you? You wanted to hurt me. I almost pitied her at that moment. Almost. Because as much as I hated what was happening, there was a part of me that had finally reached a place of complete clarity. I didn't cheat until you did, I said quietly. This was your doing, Laura. I never even considered being with anyone else. But you made your choice when you started sleeping with Mark. And now, I've made mine. She opened her mouth, probably to hurl another excuse or some half-baked accusation, but I cut her off. You need to leave. Her eyes went wide. What? I said, you need to leave, I repeated, my voice steady. Pack your things and go. You're not staying here anymore. For a moment, she stood there, stunned into silence. She had probably never expected me to throw her out. Laura had always been the one in control, the one who called the shots. But not anymore. This was the end of the line for her. You can't be serious, she stammered, her voice breaking. Oh, I'm dead serious, I said, stepping out of bed and grabbing my clothes. You wanted to be with Mark so badly. Fine. Go be with him. But you're not going to do it from my house. You lost that privilege the second you started sneaking around behind my back. For the first time that night, I saw real fear in her eyes. She knew I wasn't bluffing. And, despite all her bravado, she realized that she was truly and completely screwed. For a moment, Laura just stood there, frozen, like she couldn't quite believe what was happening. I think, for all her scheming and lies, she'd never expected things to spiral this far out of control. She had always been so good at manipulating situations, at twisting things to her advantage. But this time, there was no escape for her. You're kicking me out, she whispered, her voice barely audible, like she was in shock. Yeah, I said, my voice steady. You're leaving, tonight. This is my house, and I'm done playing games with you. Her face contorted in disbelief. You can't just throw me out. This is my home too, she shrieked, her voice rising as she tried to regain control. We've been married for almost 30 years, you can't just kick me out like I'm some stranger off the street. I leaned against the dresser, arms crossed, not budging. Watch me, I said calmly. I've put up with your lies, your cheating, and your bullshit for long enough. You think you can sneak around with Mark and still come back here like everything's normal? No. Not anymore. Pack your things and get out. She started pacing again, flinging her hands in the air as if trying to summon the right words to get her way. You're being ridiculous, she spat. It's not like I planned any of this. Things just happened, and now you're overreacting. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Overreacting? She had been sneaking around behind my back for months, having an affair with some loser from her office, and I was the one overreacting. Let me spell it out for you, Laura, I said, my voice getting colder. You cheated. You lied. You broke our marriage. And now, I'm done with you. You're leaving, and I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here. Her face twisted again, desperation mixing with anger. Where am I supposed to go? To his place. She spat the word his like she was disgusted with herself, but the irony wasn't lost on me. I don't care, I said flatly. Call him, call a friend, call a damn taxi. It's not my problem anymore. She stood there, silent for a moment, trying to process the reality of what was happening. I think a part of her still believed she could talk her way out of this, that she could convince me to let her stay. But not this time. Not after everything I had uncovered. And then, just like that, the tears started. Laura had always been a master at using her emotions to manipulate a situation, but this time it was different. These weren't the usual crocodile tears. She was genuinely panicking. For the first time, she wasn't in control, and she knew it. You can't do this, she whispered, her voice breaking as she wiped her eyes. You can't just throw me out. What about us? What about everything we've built? I stared at her, almost feeling sorry for her. Almost. But not quite. What about everything we've built? I repeated, shaking my head. Laura, you burned that to the ground the second you decided to sneak around with Mark. There is no us anymore. You made sure of that. She sobbed again, but I stayed firm. I wasn't going to let her tears sway me this time. I had been planning for this moment for weeks, ever since I found out about her affair. And now that it was here, I was ready to end it. Start packing, I said, turning away from her. You're leaving tonight. I walked out of the bedroom, leaving her standing there, her sobs echoing behind me. As I headed downstairs, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. This was the right thing to do. I had spent too long being manipulated, lied to, and disrespected. Kicking her out wasn't just about getting revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. I grabbed a drink from the kitchen, sat down in the living room, and waited. I could hear her upstairs, frantically moving around, probably packing whatever she could grab in a hurry. I didn't care. I was done with her, done with the lies, the games, the betrayals. This was my moment of freedom, and I was going to savor it. After about an hour, Laura finally came downstairs, dragging a couple of suitcases behind her. Her face was red and blotchy from crying, but I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. "Where are you going to go?" I asked, not because I cared, but because I was curious to see if she'd actually go crawling back to Mark. "I'll figure it out," she muttered, avoiding my gaze. I could tell she was embarrassed, humiliated even, but that didn't change anything for me. She stood there for a moment, as if waiting for me to change my mind, to call her back, to beg her to stay. But I didn't say a word. I just stared at her, cold and indifferent. This was her mess, and now it was her problem. Finally, she huffed, grabbed her bags, and stormed out the door. The slam of the front door echoed through the house, and just like that, she was gone. I sat there for a long time, just sipping my drink, letting it all sink in. I had finally done it. I had kicked her out of my life. But as much as I wanted to feel triumphant, all I felt was a strange emptiness. In the days that followed, the house was eerily quiet. Laura was gone, but her presence still lingered in the empty rooms, in the silence that filled the spaces where our life had once been. I wasn't sad, though. I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt nothing. The kind of numbness that comes after a long, exhausting fight when you're too tired to feel anything but relief that it's finally over. But I knew it wasn't truly over. Not yet. I had already spoken with my lawyer before all of this went down. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. We were well off, more than comfortable, really, and there was no way I was going to let Laura walk away with half of everything I had built. No, she was going to pay for what she did, and I was going to make sure she didn't get a dime more than she deserved. The lawyer had already drawn up the papers. I had the upper hand in every way, her affair with Mark, the photos, the texts, all of it was evidence that would leave her with almost nothing. She thought she could walk away from our marriage with a clean slate, but I was about to show her just how wrong she was. 2 days after I kicked her out, I served her with divorce papers. I knew she would fight it, try to negotiate, maybe even attempt to reconcile. But I wasn't interested in any of that. I wanted her out of my life for good, and I wasn't going to let her drag this out. My lawyer was a shark, and I had no doubt we would win. The evidence was on my side. Laura, with her lies and betrayal, didn't stand a chance. When she called me after getting the papers, her voice was filled with a mix of shock and anger. She tried to plead, tried to explain. "We can fix this," she said. "We can go to therapy. We can work on us." I didn't even bother responding to that. There was no us left to work on. She had destroyed it the moment she chose to be with Mark. Instead, I stayed calm, cool, and direct. "This is what you wanted, Laura," I said. "You made your choice. Now live with it." She was furious, of course, but there was nothing she could do. She knew the evidence I had would destroy her in court, and the prenup we had signed back when we first got married made sure she wouldn't walk away with much. She had no leverage, no way to fight back. For once, Laura was out of moves. The divorce process took months, but it played out exactly the way I had expected. My lawyer shredded her in court. The photos, the texts, everything was laid out for the judge to see. Her affair with Mark was undeniable, and the judge wasn't sympathetic. In the end, I walked away with the house, the majority of our assets, and more importantly, my dignity intact. Laura, on the other hand, was left with scraps, a small settlement that wouldn't last her more than a few months. When the final ruling came down, I felt empty. Not victorious. Not happy. Just relieved that it was finally over. I had won, but at what cost? The life I had built for 28 years was gone, and the person I thought I knew better than anyone turned out to be a complete stranger. After the divorce was finalized, I blocked Laura on everything, my phone, social media, email. I didn't want to hear from her, didn't want to see her ever again. I had no idea where she went, and frankly, I didn't care. She could live out the rest of her days with Mark, or alone, it didn't matter to me. As far as I was concerned, she was just a chapter in my life that I had finally closed. But the truth is, even after winning the divorce, I didn't feel like I had really won anything. Sure, I had protected my assets, I had kept my dignity, and I had made Laura face the consequences of her actions. But the scars of betrayal don't just fade away. They linger. They remind you that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to repair. The months that followed were quiet. I threw myself into work, expanding my business, staying busy to keep my mind off everything. I traveled more, reconnected with old friends, and started building a life for myself that didn't revolve around Laura or our broken marriage. Therapy helped too. Slowly, I began to let go of the anger, the bitterness, the constant replaying of every lie she had told. I had to learn how to live for myself again, not for the memories of what we had or the revenge I had taken. As for relationships, I wasn't interested. Not anymore. I'd learned my lesson the hard way. Love, trust, commitment, those things felt like distant concepts now, like relics from a past life. I wasn't bitter, just realistic. I didn't need anyone else to be happy. For the first time in years, I realized that I could be whole on my own. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about Laura. Not in a way that made me miss her, but in a way that made me wonder how things had gone so wrong. How someone who once promised to love me forever could turn into a stranger so easily. But I never lingered on those thoughts for too long. What was done, and dwelling on it wouldn't change a thing. The truth is, life goes on. Betrayal happens, people change, marriages fall apart. And as much as I had wanted revenge, as much as I had gotten it, the real victory was in moving forward. In learning how to rebuild a life that didn't include the pain and the lies. I had won, but in the end, the only thing that really mattered was that I had survived. And sometimes, that's the best you can hope for. And to anyone reading this who's going through something similar, trust your gut, protect yourself, and know that, eventually, you'll come out the other side. Maybe a little scarred, maybe a little wiser, but definitely stronger.
Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support and for tuning into my stories on YouTube. Your enthusiasm and feedback mean the world to me. Stay tuned for more exciting tales. Warm regards.